This is a story that challenges everything we know about forgiveness, pride, and divine mercy. A man who spent his final days mocking faith would discover, in the very last seconds of his life, that not even the most terrible offenses can silence the infinite love of the Virgin Mary. Prepare yourself to witness one of the greatest miracles of the Virgin Mary ever recorded inside a penitentiary. A story that transformed not only the life of a condemned man, but also shook the convictions of everyone who witnessed the impossible. Before we go on, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from and what time it is right now. I'd love to see how far the miracles of the Virgin Mary are reaching. Mark Thompson was 41 years old when he received his final sentence. Unlike other inmates who found God in their last years, Mark chose the opposite path. He became the most feared prisoner in the block, not because of violence, but because of his terrifying ability to corrode the faith of others. During 12 years awaiting his final verdict, Mark built a reputation that inspired fear. Whenever a new chaplain arrived, he would always receive the same warning: "Be careful with cell 13." And the guards would add in a low voice, "In 5 minutes, he can make a chaplain doubt his own calling." But there was something even more disturbing about Mark. He didn't just reject faith, he attacked it with surgical precision, especially when it came to the Virgin Mary. It was as if he knew exactly where to strike to cause the greatest spiritual damage. Father William Brown was the 7th chaplain to try to reach Mark in 5 years. When he approached the cell for the first time, Mark was lying on his bed, staring at the ceiling with a disturbing smile. "I came to talk about salvation." The priest's voice came out calm, almost timid. Mark laughed, a laugh that echoed through the bars. "Salvation? Tell me, Father, where was your God when I was 6 years old and beaten by my stepfather? Where was he when my sister died at 14? And where was this so-called Virgin Mary when I was humiliated in the orphanage?" Father Brown swallowed hard. He had heard tragic stories before, but Mark's bitterness was palpable, almost physical. "God allows suffering in order to—" the priest began. "For nothing," Mark interrupted, suddenly rising, his eyes burning with rage. "Do you know what I think of your Virgin Mary? She was made to deceive the weak." Then Mark spat on the ground, crushing it under his boot. "If there's anything real out there, let it come stop me." Father Brown stepped back, visibly shaken. Tears began to well up in his eyes. Mark smiled with diabolical satisfaction. Another man of faith had been broken. "Next!" Mark shouted to the other inmates, who watched in horrified silence. In the months that followed, Mark intensified his campaign against everything sacred. He discovered that specifically attacking the Virgin Mary caused a greater impact on the Catholics who visited the prison. It was as if he had found the perfect weapon against faith. During the sessions with psychologists, Mark reported disturbing dreams involving the image of the Mother of Jesus. When groups came to sing hymns, he would shout insults directed at Holy Mary. What disturbed the staff the most was the gradual change Mark was causing in other inmates. Men who once sought comfort in faith began questioning their beliefs after conversations with him. Director James Miller considered placing him in complete isolation, but Mark was too clever to break explicit rules. His blasphemies were always calculated, always within legal limits, yet devastatingly effective. "This man is different," said the psychologist in a confidential report. "It is not just rebellion or trauma. There seems to be something deeper in his intent to corrode the faith of others." In December 2008, a new volunteer arrived at the prison. Sister Catherine, a 34-year-old nun who had dedicated her life to working with prisoners. She had heard about Mark and specifically requested to work with him. "Hi, Sister," said Director Miller during the orientation meeting. "This man has destroyed the faith of 7 chaplains. He is particularly cruel with devotees of the Virgin Mary. He has already made 3 volunteers cry. Perhaps you should start with someone less dangerous." "Mr. Miller," Sister Catherine replied with a determination that surprised the director. "That is exactly why I asked to come here. Our Lady showed me in prayer that this man especially needs mercy." "Sister, with all due respect," Father Brown intervened, still not fully recovered from his encounter with Mark, "this man does not merely reject God. He seems to have a direct connection with evil. His blasphemies are from another world." Sister Catherine gently touched the crucifix on her chest. "Then he needs Our Lady even more." When Sister Catherine approached cell 13, Mark studied her with predatory interest. It was rare for such a young nun to volunteer to work with prisoners serving definitive sentences. He could feel faith radiating from her like heat. "So," said Mark with a smile that chilled the blood of the nearby guards, "did they send a little girl to play saint? Let me guess. You came to save my wicked soul?" "I only came to talk," the sister replied calmly, sitting on the chair outside the cell. Mark laughed loudly. "About Jesus? About your Virgin Mary? And about how God loves me even after everything I've done?" He came closer to the bars, his eyes gleaming with malice. "Little sister, you don't know what snake pit you've walked into." Mark laid it all out as he always did. But this time he crossed every line. He began to describe, with almost theatrical cruelty, things so offensive that even the toughest inmates fell silent. The guards exchanged glances. One turned his face away, another stepped back. "Director, we need to put an end to this," one of them requested over the radio, barely able to summon the courage to hear it through to the end. But to everyone's surprise, Sister Catherine did not back down. She did not cry, did not take offense, did not run away. She simply listened to him in silence, sometimes closing her eyes as if in prayer. Mark went on for almost an hour, pushing his insults to an increasingly extreme and disconcerting tone. He uttered slurs so low that even the toughest inmates fell silent, words that seemed to come from something beyond his own reason. When he finally stopped, gasping from so much hatred poured out, Sister Catherine opened her eyes and simply said, "Are you done?" For the first time in years, Mark was completely bewildered. You're not going to leave crying? You're not going to tell me I'm a monster?" "Why would I do that? Our Lady endured worse on the cross, watching her son die. Do you think your words can hurt her?" Mark felt something he hadn't experienced in a long time, uncertainty. His whole strategy depended on shocking and breaking people's faith. This woman seemed immune. "You don't understand," Mark said, his voice losing some of its usual confidence. "I'm different from the others. I didn't just deny God, I cursed him." Sister Catherine smiled gently. "And even so, the Virgin Mary sent me here to you." In the days that followed, something strange began to happen. Mark, who had always dominated his interactions with religious people, found himself thinking about Sister Catherine constantly. He had thrown all his most powerful weapons at her, and nothing had worked. Worse, she came back every week, always with the same disturbing serenity. "Why don't you give up?" Mark asked during the third visit. "Because Our Lady never gives up," the sister replied. "Even when her children spit in her face, she keeps loving." Mark laughed, but this time the sound seemed forced. "I've done things that would make your saint cry blood." "She has already cried blood," Sister Catherine said calmly. "In Fatima, in Akita, in hundreds of places around the world, Our Lady weeps for the sins of humanity, including yours." "You don't understand," Mark exploded, pounding the bars. "I don't want forgiveness. I chose the dark side. I sold my soul a long time ago." "No one can sell something that doesn't belong to them," the sister answered. "Your soul belongs to God no matter what you think you've done." Mark began to laugh hysterically. "You want to know what really happened? Want to know why I hate your Virgin Mary so much?" Sister Catherine remained silent, waiting. "I was 8 years old when my mother died of leukemia," Mark said, his voice growing darker. "She was devoted to the Virgin Mary. She prayed the rosary every day. Our house had images in every corner. In her final days, she made me promise never stop trusting in Our Lady." Mark's eyes welled up. "You know what happened after she died? I was sent to an orphanage. The people who should have protected me laughed at me, humiliated me. Every night I looked at the image of the Virgin Mary on the dormitory wall and begged her to save me," Mark continued. "Every night I prayed the rosary my mother had taught me, and do you know what happened? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. And then," Mark said with a bitter smile, "at 12 years old I made a choice. If the Virgin Mary could not or would not protect me, then I would spend the rest of my life attacking the faith she represents." Mark looked directly into Sister Catherine's eyes. "Do you understand now? I am not just a lost man." To his surprise, tears began to stream down Sister Catherine's face, but she was not crying out of fear or horror. It was pure compassion. "Mark," she said softly, "you are just a wounded child blaming the wrong person. Our Lady never abandoned you. It was men who failed you, not her." "No," Mark shouted. "Don't try to give me hope. I am beyond redemption. I chose my path." "No one is beyond redemption while still breathing," the sister replied. "And Our Lady showed me something about you in prayer." Mark stopped shouting. "What?" "She showed me that, through all these years, even in the midst of all your anger and blasphemy, a part of you still waits for her. That is why your words carry so much hatred, because they come from a wounded love, not from a total absence of love." Mark felt something break inside his chest. A pain he had buried for decades began to rise to the surface. On March 15, 2009, Mark received the notification he had been waiting for over 12 years. His sentence would be carried out on March 18th at 6 o'clock in the evening. All legal appeals had been exhausted. There would be no more delays. The news spread quickly through the prison. Mark Thompson, the man who had terrorized chaplains and shattered the faith of dozens of people, would finally face his destiny. Curiously, instead of the relief the guards expected to feel, a heavy atmosphere settled over the maximum security block. Even those who feared Mark recognized that something significant was about to happen. Sister Catherine requested special permission to spend the last 3 days with Mark. Warden Miller, normally strict about protocols, agreed. "If anyone can reach that man's soul," he said, "it's her." When the sister arrived at Mark's cell that afternoon, she found him surprisingly calm. "So," Mark said with a smile that never reached his eyes, 3 days to save the darkest soul. Do you think you can manage it?" "It is not I who will save it," the sister replied, "and you already know that." During the second afternoon of those final 3 days, Mark was sitting in his cell when he suddenly turned to Sister Catherine. "Sister," he said, in a voice she had never heard from him before, vulnerable, almost childlike. "I need to tell you something I have never told anyone." Catherine leaned forward, sensing that something important was about to be revealed. "I didn't do that to Jennifer Morrison." The words came out as a whisper, but they struck the sister like thunder. Jennifer Morrison was the 19-year-old whose case had condemned Mark so relentlessly 12 years earlier. "Mark," she said carefully, "you confessed. There was evidence—" "Planted evidence," Mark interrupted, his hands trembling. "Sister, I was a lost man, yes. I had substance problems. I had a history of petty theft. But I would never harm an innocent girl." Mark began pacing back and forth in the small cell. "On the day of the incident, I was at my supplier's house, Tommy Sullivan, but Tommy was found lifeless under obscure circumstances. He was my only witness." Catherine felt her heart race. "Then why did you confess?" "Because they had my younger brother, Danny." Mark's voice broke. "Danny was only 17. He was in the wrong place at the wrong time. The police told me that if I confessed, Danny would go free. If I didn't, they would charge us both, and Danny would spend his whole life in prison." Tears began to stream down Mark's face. "Danny was all I had for family. He was pure, sister. He had never done anything wrong. I thought I was doing the right thing." Catherine remained silent for several minutes, processing the information. Finally, she asked, Where is Danny now?" "I don't know," Mark admitted. "After I confessed, he disappeared. He probably changed his name, started a new life. That's what I wanted for him." "Mark," Catherine said slowly, "why did you never tell this to your lawyers? Why did you suffer in silence all these years?" Mark let out a bitter laugh. "Who would have believed me? A man with issues and a criminal record saying he was coerced. Besides, I was so lost in anger and hatred that part of me felt I deserved this fate anyway." Catherine touched the crucifix on her chest. "Mark, if this is true—" "It is true," Mark said with a conviction she had never heard in his voice before. "Sister, why do you think I have so much hatred toward the Virgin Mary? It's not just because of what happened in my childhood. It's because I prayed to her the first night in prison. I begged her to protect Danny, to let him have a good life. And then I never heard from him again." Mark stepped closer to the bars, his eyes shining with tears. "I misinterpreted her silence. I thought she had abandoned me again. But now, speaking with you, maybe she was protecting Danny by keeping me away from him." Catherine left the prison that afternoon with her mind in turmoil. If Mark was telling the truth, and something deep in her heart told her he was, then an innocent man would face his fate in less than 48 hours. She immediately called the public defender who had represented Mark, Robert Chen. Chen was retired but agreed to meet with her the next morning. "Sister Catherine," said Chen when she explained the situation, "I always felt there was something strange about that case. Mark confessed far too quickly, and there were inconsistencies in his statement. But without new evidence, what if we find his brother, Danny Thompson?" Chen shook his head. "Even if we find him, his testimony about police pressure would be difficult to prove after so much time. We'd need something more concrete." Catherine spent the next 20 hours in a frenzy of investigation. She contacted civil rights organizations, private investigators, and even journalists who had covered the original case. It was when she called Sarah Mitchell, a retired investigative journalist, that she found the first real lead. "The Thompson case," Sarah said thoughtfully. "I remember it. There were rumors at the time about irregular police pressure, but we could never prove anything." "Rumors about what exactly?" "Two names, sister, Richards and Foster. They were known for doing whatever it took to close a case. Richards retired right after the Thompson case. Foster died in 2012. Catherine felt a spark of hope. "Is there any way to contact Richards?" "I can try," said Sarah. "But, sister, he never spoke to reporters. I doubt he'll talk to you." On the morning of Mark's final sentencing day, Catherine still had not been able to reach Dave Richards. She was desperate when her phone rang. It was Sarah Mitchell. "Sis, you're not going to believe this. Richards called me back. Apparently he's in very poor health. Well, he wants to clear his conscience." Catherine almost dropped the phone. "What did he say?" "He confirmed everything. He said they put strong pressure on him, even insinuating they'd involve your brother. But there's more. They knew who really did that to Jennifer Morrison." The world stopped for Catherine. "Who?" "The son of a very wealthy businessman. The boy was intoxicated, tried to force himself on Jennifer, and when she resisted, Richard said the boy's father came to them the next day with a proposal. They would frame Mark Thompson, who already had a record, and in return their careers would be protected." Catherine began to tremble. "Is Richards going to testify?" "He's already recorded a full confession. He's sending it by email right now." It was 2 p.m. Mark was scheduled to be taken to the prepared location at 6 p.m. Catherine frantically called Robert Chen, who immediately began racing against time to persuade the judge to stop everything. But the legal process still required hours, time they didn't have. "Sis," Chen said, "even with this confession, it may take hours or even days for the courts to review. I need to contact the judge directly." Catherine then did something she had never done before. She started calling every contact she knew in the legal field, begging someone to speed up the process. While Catherine worked desperately to save Mark, He was being prepared for his final moments. During the day, he had asked for only one strange thing, a small statue of the Virgin Mary. "Why?" asked Director Miller, surprised by the request. "I want to do something I should have done a long time ago," Mark answered enigmatically. When Catherine arrived to see him for the last time, it was 4:30 p.m. Mark was calmer than she had ever seen him, but there was something different in his eyes. "Sis," he said, "thank you for believing in me. Even if nothing changes, you've given me something I hadn't had in years, the feeling of being heard." Catherine struggled to hold back tears. She couldn't tell him about the investigation. She didn't want to give him hopes that might be crushed. "Mark, are you sure about what you plan to do?" Mark looked at the small statue of the Virgin Mary that sat on the table beside his cell. "Sis, for 25 years I blamed her for everything that went wrong in my life. Today is the day to settle accounts." Catherine felt a chill. "Mark, don't do anything you might regret." "I won't regret it," Mark said, with a disturbing calm. At 5:30 p.m., the guards came for him. Mark was taken to the reserved room at 5:45. The prison's official chaplain, Father Matthew, was present, along with Director Miller, 2 doctors, and a few staff members. Catherine had been given special permission to be present as Mark's spiritual counselor. As Mark was being prepared, Catherine clutched her phone, desperately waiting for a call from Lawyer Chen. In the hallway leading to the reserved room, there was a small table with Mark's final requested belongings, including the small statue of the Virgin Mary. When Mark passed by the table, he stopped. "May I take it?" he asked Director Miller. Miller nodded, curious to see what Mark would do. Mark grabbed the statue with both hands. Everyone in the hallway stopped to watch, expecting him to deliver yet another one of his final blasphemies. But what happened next left everyone completely frozen. Mark lifted the small image of the Virgin Mary and suddenly let it fall, shattering it into pieces before them all. The silence was absolute. Many expected one last provocation. But with tears in his eyes, he shocked them all. "Virgin Mary, I broke your image just as I have broken myself for so many years. But if, through your Son, the impossible has already happened, then perhaps even a man like me can be restored." Mark knelt down among the pieces of the statue. "I ask forgiveness for all the years of hatred, for every blasphemy, for blaming you for the failures of men." The guards looked at each other, utterly confused. Was this it? Was this the terrible final blasphemy everyone had been expecting? "Now I understand," Mark continued, still on his knees, "that breaking your image does not break your love, just as my anger never diminished your mercy." And it was exactly at that moment, at 5:58 in the evening, 2 minutes before the end, that Catherine's phone rang. "Sister Catherine, this is Robert Chen. Judge Wilson has agreed to review the emergency evidence." "A temporary suspension has been authorized right now," Catherine shouted. "Stop! There's a judicial suspension. Stop everything!" Director Miller, bewildered, halted the entire procedure while verifying the information. Mark, still kneeling among the pieces of the statue, looked at Catherine with tears in his eyes. "What is happening?" "Mark," Catherine said, approaching with tears streaming down her own face, "new evidence has surfaced. The truth has come to light. You were never alone. And now even the justice of men recognizes that you are innocent." Mark looked down at the shattered pieces of the Virgin Mary at his feet and whispered, "Mother, you never abandoned me." Detective Richards's confession led to a full investigation, which not only freed Mark, but also resulted in the arrest of several others involved in the original cover-up. Bradley Wilson, now a 43-year-old businessman, was finally held accountable for what truly happened to Jennifer Morrison under the weight of undeniable evidence. Mark spent only 2 more weeks in prison before his official release. During those 2 weeks, something extraordinary happened. The man who had spent 12 years destroying people's faith became the greatest evangelizer inside the prison. Inmates who had lost all hope began seeking him out. Guards who had once feared him now came asking for spiritual advice. "It's a miracle," said Father Matthew to Director Miller. "The same man who once made me question my vocation is now bringing more people to God than I managed to in 20 years of chaplaincy." On the day of his release, Mark walked out of prison carrying only 2 things, a Bible and a small bag with the broken pieces of the statue of the Virgin Mary that he had shattered. A crowd of reporters awaited him, but Mark made only one statement. "I spent 12 years blaming God and the Virgin Mary for the failures of men. Today I understand that even in the darkest moments of my life, when I thought I had been abandoned, divine mercy was working through people like Sister Catherine." Mark paused, looking directly at the cameras. "For those who have lost their faith, for those who feel abandoned by God, I was the most lost man you could ever imagine. If there is hope for me, then there is hope for anyone." 3 months after his release, Mark did something that surprised even Sister Catherine. He returned to prison, not as an inmate, but as a volunteer. "I want to work with the men who are where I once was," he explained to Director Miller. "I want to show them that no matter how lost you feel, there is always hope." Miller, who had witnessed Mark's complete transformation, immediately approved the request. Today, Mark Thompson is the director of an organization called Broken Pieces, a ministry that helps former inmates reintegrate into society. He married Lisa, a therapist he met during a conference on social reintegration. During his lectures in schools and churches, Mark always ends with the same message: "If you are broken today, do not despair. If you feel that you have done unforgivable things, do not give up. If you think you are too far from the mercy of God, you are wrong." And so, in the face of the impossible, we saw that even the hardest hearts can be transformed by divine mercy. Let us together lift our voices in prayer. O Virgin Mary, Mother of Mercy, we ask you, look with compassion upon all those who today are lost in hatred, in pain, or in hopelessness. Touch the hardened hearts and let the flame of forgiveness and faith be born within them. Intercede for our families, protect our homes, and strengthen our trust in Jesus, your beloved Son. May it be that even in the darkest nights of life, we may remember that we are never alone, for your maternal gaze accompanies us and your intercession sustains us. Amen. Now I want to hear from you. Do you believe that miracles of the Virgin Mary like this can still happen in our days? Leave your answer in the comments, and if you'd like, share a personal testimony as well. And don't leave just yet. Click now on the video that is appearing on your screen. I have prepared special content that will touch your heart even more. Don't forget, subscribe to the channel, activate the notification bell to receive more stories of the miracles of Our Lady, and share this video with someone who needs to renew their hope today. May God bless you and see you in the next video.